Yeah, I might just start anywhere. But I'm going to start right there. This morning's lesson is why I am a Christian. And the lesson is not why did I become a Christian. I became a Christian when I was very young because that's how I was raised. But once I became an adult and thought through some of these things, I said I need to stay a Christian because these things are right. I'm one of those very fortunate people who grew up being taught truth. A lot of folks do not have that privilege, and we need to pray for the good Lord for them. Being blessed that way, I want to express this morning some of the reasons why I am still a Christian, why I remain a Christian. And this passage in 1 Peter chapter 3 implores us to come up with an answer for the time when we will be asked, why are you a Christian? Why do you hope in Christ? That's what Peter is saying. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account. That's what I'm doing this morning. I'm making an account for the hope that is in Christ. And I want to do it with gentleness and reverence because that's what Peter says to do. So, why am I a Christian? It seems to me there are only two alternatives in life. You either believe in God or you deny that there is a God. And I've considered the possibility of denying that there's a God, and I just can't. There's nothing that I can wrap my mind around to say that everything that is came into existence by accident. And for me, some of the best proponents of belief in God are those who call themselves atheists. Because I want to ask myself, why in the world do you spend your life arguing against something that you don't even believe in? I mean, if you don't believe in something, okay, you don't believe in it. Why do you want to convince everybody else that you don't believe in that? It seems to me it's like Shakespeare said, he doth protest too much, or something like that. If you're a Shakespearean student and I misquoted that, I apologize. But I think that's what the guy said. That's the idea. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't believe in, and I don't go around making sure people know that I don't believe in those things. Like unicorns. I don't believe in unicorns, and I'm not trying to mock and make fun. I'm just saying I'm trying to make sense of this because that's what we have to do. We have to reason. Isn't it marvelous when God said to Israel through his prophet Isaiah, come and let us reason together. God gave us a mind, and that mind is a marvelous thing, and it bears witness to me that there is a creator who is a mindful creator. Because there are things in this world that we don't understand. We understand that there are physical things, but there are also the metaphysical things. There is no explanation, no logical, reasonable explanation for how everything physical came into being on its own without a creator. There's just no way to prove that has happened. Now, there's several programs that you'll see and you'll hear and books that you can read that'll claim that happened, but there's really nothing to that when you get to the bottom of it, that things just came into existence. Now, that's the physical. What about the metaphysical? Where's the explanation for your thoughts? You're thinking right now. You're listening, you're hearing, and your mind is making sense of what you are hearing. You're seeing with your eyes, and your mind is making sense of what you hear. And your brain is making more calculations than you can even imagine. And there is no system in this world created by man that can even come a fraction close to what God's mind that he's given you is doing for you right now. What are your thoughts? Where do they come from? Where's the explanation for how those have arisen? And where is the explanation for the fact that in all humanity, this is universal, all of humanity worships? Even cultures that don't know about the true and living God, they worship. Why is it that in our minds, for which we have no explanation for their coming into existence, all of those minds worship? And all of those minds also have a sense of morality and justice and judgment. It's across the board. Not all moralities are the same. You'll go to some cultures and they'll think that some things are moral that we think are not moral, and yet every human culture has a moral code. Where do we get this from? Where do we get this concept of worship and this compulsion to worship? It's in us. And the only way to get rid of those things is to try to teach ourselves out of them. If we don't want them, we have to train ourselves not to want them, not to believe in them. But faith in God makes perfect sense. And one of the things that makes perfect sense to me about is when I just look at the creation, and Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 1. He says this, verse 18, Romans 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Now, if there is no God, there is no truth. The concept of truth and right and wrong goes out the window. You cannot have right and wrong without a God who is the lawgiver. Without God, nothing is right, nothing is wrong. There's no such thing as truth, as something to be valued. Paul goes on to say in verse 19, that which is known about God is evident within them. God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. What Paul is affirming is that when you look at the creation, there's ample evidence for the existence of God and his eternal power. Because if we keep going back and back and back and back, and you'll hear this in programs too. I was listening to one last night. It was about the ketogenic diet. Have you heard of that? I think that's what it's called. And they were interviewing Aboriginal folks in Africa, and they said, this is the oldest culture on earth. It goes back 40,000 years. And I'm thinking, really? 40,000 years? That's the oldest culture on earth? All right, okay. You got anything to testify to that really testifies to that? Back and back and back we can go, and nobody can get to the beginning because nobody was there except the one who told us about it. And everything he's told us about it is proven accurate. Well, we'll get to that later. But what Paul is saying is that all of these things are evident to the world based on the creation. You look around you and you know there had to be a creator. You go out in that parking lot, you pick any car, the worst car or the best car, you pick any car and you try to convince someone that car just happened. No, it won't work that way. Everybody knows every car out there was created. I wish I'd have brought this picture. I think I got it on my phone. I can pull it up on my phone and just pass it around. You can look at it. But what it is, we were up in North Dakota. We were going through the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It's a great place. If you ever get to go to North Dakota, go to the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. You'll see lots of neat things like buffalo and elk and all that good, cool stuff. But we were walking along this trail, and I saw three rocks that were stacked on top of a log. And I took a picture of it. Now, why would I take a picture of three rocks stacked on top of a log? Because anybody would look at that picture and they would say, oh, some human being put those rocks there. There's no way that could have occurred naturally. Three rocks stacked neatly on top of a log. Now, it's just three rocks on a log. But you look at that and you go, somebody had to do that. What's the obvious implication of the creation? Paul is saying it is that there is a God. Now, if there is a God, let's just say we all assume that there is a God. Why the God of the Bible? Well, the Bible. If you read the Bible, it's its own best evidence that it is the book from God. Now, when you go to Psalm 19, and Psalm 19 is normally where we go to argue for the first thing we were just talking about, which is the creation. Because in Psalm 19, as it begins, it says this, the heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of its chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the other end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. What's he saying? He's saying the same thing Paul said. The heavens declare the glory of God. You look at the earth. You look at the sun coming up, you look at the moon, you look at the stars, they're telling us, they have a language, and there's no place where that language isn't heard, because all over the earth you see this. The order that is here. Some people will argue, there's a lot of disorder in the universe. Well, we understand that the disorder comes from sin. That's what God explains in the Scriptures. But overall, there is so much order. When's the last time you got up in the morning and you worried, will there be gravity today? Will there be oxygen in the air today? Not whether or not you can breathe it, because some people have breathing problems, but you never wake up and worry, I don't know if there's going to be enough oxygen tomorrow. You know, it's going to be the 19th of August. Might not be enough oxygen, or gravity might stop working on the 19th of August. Nobody thinks like that. Nobody worries about that. Is the sun going to come up tomorrow? Well, we just count on it because it's been so regular. The tides. Why are they just so limited, really? When you look at the vast expanse of the ocean and those tides, they just come so far and they go back out. So far and back out. Even tsunamis, even the great tsunamis, they don't go that far inland when you look at the mass of land that there is. God has regulated this planet. He's regulated the universe. Why aren't comets and meteorites smashing into us constantly and doing that horrible damage, like some are saying that wiped out all the dinosaurs? God has brought order on this planet. But the rest of the psalm talks about the order that he brings in our lives through his law. Look at verse 7. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. And the judgments of the Lord are true, they're righteous altogether. And then he gives a statement about their worth. They're more desirable than gold. Really? Really? I know a lot of folks that want gold. I've never met one person that was happy with gold because gold was in their life. Because no matter how much gold they've got, you know what they want? They want some more. They want some more. I've met a lot of people happy with God. Had hardly any gold at all. There's something to that. And our own minds testify to this. We might argue and fight against it mentally, but we know that this is right. All of our lives we've known things that were right and we try to argue against because those weren't the things we wanted to do. But God always calls us back to what is right, even if it's uncomfortable. Even if we disagree with it, He always calls us back to what's right. That's one of the things about the Bible that I not only love, but tells me this isn't from man. This is greater than man. Men couldn't come up with this. Because you think about this book. It was written over a period of about 1,500 years. Genesis was probably written by Moses around 1500 BC. Then you come right up through the first century, and in the first century the New Testament was written down and it was finished. So you've got about 1,500 years worth of time where men wrote, about 40 different men. You try to get 40 different guys to write anything that agrees perfectly together, you got a problem on your hands, and you're doing this over 1,500 years. And we're talking about a wide range of men as well. Solomon was a king. David was a king. They wrote, but what was Amos? Amos said, I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet. I take care of sycamore trees. What was Matthew? He was a tax collector. Peter, fisherman. We got all these guys, 40 guys over 1,500 years writing what they write, and not a single one of them disagree with another. Now, a lot of folks will say, oh, there's contradictions in the Bible. You can get on the internet and type in Bible contradiction. You know, come up with a whole bunch of sites. But when you start examining these, because I've done this, I get on those sites and I examine, what are they saying is a contradiction? Every single one of those contradictions has an explanation. I've not found one yet that didn't have a reasonable, logical explanation if you were willing to look at those passages in context. Fascinating to me, because you would think that by now, how long has the Bible been around? By now, somebody would have come up with the nail that would put down the lid of the coffin of faith in the Bible, but nobody's ever done it, and the Bible remains a bestseller. Do you know why that is? Because people read it and they go, wow, this is the stuff we need right here. Jesus said it himself in John chapter 7. David's writing about it here in the Psalms, but when Jesus wrote about this is how he said it in John chapter 7, John's Gospel. John chapter 7, verse 14. When it was now the midst of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and he began to teach. The Jews then were astonished, saying, how has this man become learned, having never been educated? In other words, they were impressed with what Jesus had to say. This guy's smart. He knows his stuff. What was it that we just read in the Psalm? The law of the Lord is able to make you wise. Jesus was the law of the Lord. He was the embodiment of the law of the Lord. He was the Word of God in flesh. And as he was teaching in the temple, people were listening to him and said, man, how's this guy learn this stuff? This is just some guy from Galilee or from Nazareth. How did he do that? So Jesus answered them and said, my teaching's not mine. Really? Where's your teaching from, Jesus? My teaching's from the one that sent me. And then he laid this down for us. If anyone is willing to do his will, he will know of the teaching, whether it is of God or whether I speak from myself. Excuse me. I hate to do that to you, but I needed to cough. What's Jesus saying? So you want to find out if this stuff is true? Just do it for a while. How many here have ever tried a diet? Okay, you don't have to put your hands up. I know I'm not raising my hand. You read about these diets. You see them on TV. They have these, you're looking through the channels trying to find something interesting to watch, and there's this thing, and you know what it is. It's going to say paid advertisement. They're trying to get you to go on some diet. How do you know if the diet works? You try it. You try it for a while. Now, if that diet says, if you go on this diet for 3 days, you'll lose 10 pounds. Who's willing to try something for 3 days to lose 10 pounds? I'm not seeing any hands. Boy, you guys. Come on, 10 pounds, 3 days? Who wouldn't do that? All you skinny people go, oh, yeah. We all hate you skinny people, by the way. But you think to yourself, okay, I'll try this. And you try it, and after 3 days, how are you going to judge whether or not the diet's any good? Have you lost 10 pounds? If you've lost 10 pounds in 3 days, you go, wow, that's a good diet. And if you haven't lost 10 pounds, you go, that was a big lie. Got sucked in again. Hand me a Big Mac. So, but that's all. How many different diets are there out there, by the way? I mean, there's the South Beach, there's the Atkins, there's this keto thing that's popular now, which sounds good to me because all they're saying is go back and eat natural stuff. Just eat the stuff God made in the beginning. But whatever diet it is, you're not going to know if it works until you do it. So Jesus is saying, guys, here's the test. You want to know if what I'm teaching you is from God? Just do it. Just do it. And I'm here to testify. In my life of using God's Word as a standard, it works. I'm not here to tell you it's made me perfect, but it keeps drawing me. It keeps drawing me towards what is perfect. And it's not a what that's perfect, it's a who, because the gospel of Jesus Christ is not something you simply put down on paper. The gospel of Jesus Christ is Christ. And it's what He has done for us. And when I look at that, I think, yeah, my heart speaks to me. My mind speaks to me. Everything that I am speaks to me and says, that is the truth. And I really believe that happens in almost everyone, if not everyone. But some folks don't want that, and so they deny it. And you know how that works, because we've all done that. Somebody will tell you some truth, and when you hear it, you know it's true, but it's something you don't want to believe, and so you're reticent to accept it. I think I've told you this before. I was talking with a young lady up here when the Price Saver was a grocery store, whatever. I asked her about coming to church. She said, I don't want to go to church. I said, why not? Why don't you want to go to church? Worship the Lord. She said, well, I know if I did that, I'd have to change my life, and I don't want to change my life. And I thought to myself, thank you, Lord. Here is an honest human being. Now, her thinking wasn't right in the sense that she didn't want to submit herself to the Lord, but her thinking was right to know that if I submit myself to that truth, I'm going to have to change the way I live, and I don't want to do that. Now, that's honesty. I got to admire that. I got to appreciate that. And I think everybody knows what that young lady knew. That there is a right way and a wrong way to live, and Jesus' way is the right way, the most right way. You can look at all the others. I've read the Quran, I've read the Bhagavad Gita, I've read the Book of Mormon, I've read so many religious writings. None of them hold a candle to the Bible. They all appeal to the flesh in one way or another. God never appeals to the flesh. He always appeals to the spirit, to the mind. It's one of the things I love about God and about His Word and about the Scriptures, because His appeal is not to me as a person to assuage my ego and to make me think that I can somehow gain salvation for myself by earning it or by living perfectly. It's not about that. Salvation is based on what Jesus has done for me and me putting my faith in that. That is such a grand plan. There is nothing like it in the universe. And when I read this book and when I do what it says to the best of my ability, here's what I can do. I can go to bed at night, lay my head down on my pillow, and I can rest. I can have peace. That's what Paul wrote about when he wrote to the church at Philippi. Peace that's beyond understanding. And if practicing what Jesus says can give me that, even if there really is no God, let's just say there is no God at all. Well, what is it that you want out of life in the first place? Isn't it peace? Isn't it to have a peaceful life with joy? That's another thing I have through God, is joy. In the midst of suffering, in the midst of trials, in the midst of things going on that you don't want to have, you have peace, you have joy. You can have love in your heart in spite of whatever people are saying and doing to you and about you. All of those things come from Jesus Christ. If there's a God, if there's no God, nothing matters. But there is a God, and what Jesus says matters. And I can tell you, and there's probably about 325, I don't know, I can't count you. There's about that many people here this morning who can testify the same thing. That's testimony right there. That's the same testimony, however, that needs to go out of this building and into this world and talk to our friends and our neighbors and our family and testify of these things that I know to be true, that you know to be true, that we can tell other people about so that we might persuade them before it's ultimately too late, that they need to be Christians as well. These reasons that I am a Christian are reasons for which they need to be Christians. And it's not just these things. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I could talk about. And I just want to look at a few as we close. I want to look at a few of these fulfilled prophecies because these are just fantastic. I want to look at three of them. Micah chapter 5. When you look at this book and it tells you things about how to live and you live that way, wow, this is great. This really works. It's like a diet that really does do what it says it's going to do. And you don't have to wait 10 years to find out. But in Micah chapter 5, Micah says this, "But as for you, Bethlehem Ephrathah," what's Micah going to talk about when he talks about Bethlehem? "Too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Therefore he will give them up until the time when she who is in labor has borne a child, and then the remainder of his brethren will return to the sons of Israel." What's Micah talking about? He's talking about the birth of Christ, the Messiah. Where's he going to be born? Bethlehem, Judah. How did Micah know that? Hundreds of years before Jesus came. He did. These are Jewish writings, by the way. These aren't Christian writings. These are Jewish writings. And the Jews were the ones who were foremost and first to deny Christianity, if you read through the book of Acts. Another prophecy I want you to check out is in Psalm 22. Psalm 22, verses 16 through 18. Just a brief part of this psalm, where the writer says this, "For dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers has encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Who's that sound like? This is 900 to 1,000 years before Jesus. And yet David perfectly described what happened to Jesus in the crucifixion. None of these things, as far as we know, ever happened to David. His hands, his feet were not pierced. Nobody divided his clothing. Nobody cast lots for his garments, as far as we know. And yet David wrote these things down 900 years plus before they happened. And they were perfectly fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And then another one. Zechariah, chapter 11. Zechariah chapter 11. Look at verse 12. Zechariah says, "I said to them, if it's good in your sight, give me my wages, but if not, never mind. So they weighed out 30 pieces, 30 shekels of silver as my wages. Then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver, and I threw them into the potter in the house of the Lord. Now, how did Zechariah know that this was going to happen hundreds of years later when Jesus would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver? How does Zechariah know that it would be 30 pieces, and how did he know it would be silver? And how did he know that Judas, with remorse, would come back into the ones who gave him that money and say, I don't want this anymore, it is unclean? And they said, well, it's blood money, we can't take it back. And so he threw it. And where did he throw it? He threw it into the temple. What did they do with it? When they collected that money that he had thrown into the temple, they bought a cemetery. What they call it? Potter's field. Coincidence? I don't think so. Jewish writings? Yes. This wasn't put in after. The Jews would have fought against, they would have never allowed this to go in afterwards. Why didn't some of the Jews see this and say, wait a minute, don't pay Judas 30 pieces of silver, because that's what Zechariah said. You'll be fulfilling the prophecy for Jesus. You don't want to do that. But it was out of their hands. Because the God who spoke everything into existence, the God who's responsible for you and your mind and your soul and your spirit, that God knew that this was going to happen, and he had his prophet write it down hundreds of years before. That God who knew all these things beforehand also knows what's coming. And what did he tell us is coming? The same thing everything in us cries out is coming: judgment. Everybody knows. I read an interview of a Russian KGB agent. And he said, finally, there must be a God. And if there is a God, I have a lot to answer for. That's a Russian KGB agent. We know. We know we cannot do wrong and not have to account for it at some point. Why do we have that internal concept, that idea that's universal in humanity? It's universal like a sense of morality. It's universal like a sense of worship. It's universal. And we come to the Bible and we see the Bible directs us in ways that make our life peaceful and joyful. Without money, without stuff, without dependency on the things of this world, with dependency on God. That's what we see in the Scriptures. We come to the Bible and we see a book that tells us things that are going to happen hundreds of years before they do, and then they come to pass perfectly in fulfillment. And when we understand that God does that, then what about the fact that he's told us he's coming back? He's coming back. That's one of the main reasons I'm a Christian, because I believe he is. And he's coming back not only in judgment, that's what we think about so much, but he's coming back to reward. Remember what Jesus said to his apostles in John 14? You believe in God, believe also in me. Let not your hearts be troubled. What was he telling them? He said, it's necessary for me to go away, for if I go away, I'm preparing a place for you. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it wasn't so, I would have told you. What's God got prepared for you? Wow, I can't imagine. I'm looking forward to it. Now, some atheists might say to you, oh, you guys are wasting your lives. What's going to happen if you get to the end and there's no God? Well, nothing worse than what's happening to you. We'll all go off into nothing. We came from nothing, we're going to nothing. But let's flip that over. What if there is a God? I mean, if there is no God and you live your whole life as a Christian, you haven't lost a thing, because there's nothing to be gained or lost. You're going to end in total annihilation. But if there is a God, and there is a God, that's the only thing that matters. We're going to stand and sing a song of encouragement and invitation. I hope this lesson has encouraged you to become a Christian if you're not. And if you are, I hope it's bolstered your faith, strengthened you. I hope it's also encouraged us to go out into the world and let people know why we are Christians and why they need to be Christians. If you need to respond to the gospel call this morning, please let us know by coming forward while we stand and sing together.